All right. So I really wanted to finish Genesis today, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I have to do chapters 48 and 49 today and then finish with chapter 50 next week because I didn't want to rush anything. And I think the messages are always important. And I also just didn't want to like run through it too fast because it's a lot, it's a lot of reading fast. And I don't want to do that. So thank you guys for being here. I'll go ahead and start. Last week, we talked about how Pharaoh was welcoming Jacob, and Pharaoh kind of he becomes the landowner of everything, and Joseph had to get them through still the famine, but his family was with them. And now Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh is where we're at. So this is chapter 48 in Genesis. And it starts right here. Sometime after this, Joseph was told, "Your father is weaker." So he set out with his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. So I think it's kind of cool. We know that Jacob is also called Israel. He was named Israel by God. So in verse 1, it refers to him as Jacob. And then in verse 2, when he hears about Joseph coming, it refers to him as Israel because he's trying to like just muster up this strength. I don't know if you've ever been around somebody that is not doing well physically or they're in the hospital, but it's like they try to put their best face on a lot of times. I know I have. And you want to do your best to like muster up all the strength. And that's what he was doing. And I think it's cool that when it's referring to him as Israel, that's when his strength was, coming in there. So, sorry, I saw something blink on my screen. All right. So, Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. He said to me, 'I will make you fruitful and numerous, and I will make many nations come from you, and I will give this land as a permanent possession to your future descendants.'" So a lot of us might not remember exactly where God has spoken to us. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Maybe we remember the last time we heard God's voice. But this was definitely a significant thing to Jacob. And he's like letting him know, not only do I remember what God told me in my old age, but I remember where I was at. I remember the whole day. And a lot of this, like when I read a lot of this, I feel like God is really speaking through Jacob. And that's pretty much what you're going to hear in here. So he said, "I will make many nations come from you, and I will give this land as a permanent possession to your future descendants. Your two sons born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are now mine." So that be Ephraim and Manasseh. And he said, "Ephraim and Manasseh belong to me just as Reuben and Simeon do," which are his actual sons. "Children born to you after them will be yours and will be recorded under the names of their brothers with regard to their inheritance." So it's interesting to me because remember, Reuben and Simeon kind of disqualified themselves from any kind of leadership for things that took place earlier in Genesis. And we'll get to that because that's coming in the next chapter here that we're about to read. But I just think it's funny that he referred to Ephraim and Manasseh as just as Reuben and Simeon, because Reuben and Simeon were the first two. So Ephraim and Manasseh, he's saying they're his children too. It's interesting the blessings they would get from being his kids. So there's something to that here. And later we will learn, I say later, as you read the Bible, you will learn the significance between Ephraim and Manasseh. And the boys were only half Jewish, remember, because he said they're born in Egypt. They're only half Jewish. So they probably have this Egyptian attire on. They were not going to be blessed, but their names are going to be names that go for the rest of their legacy. It's going to be a part of the plans that God has and God's economy, which is a big deal. So they will be mentioned and you will hear about them, and they become a way bigger deal because of Jacob's blessings. So, but it does say here, when I was returned, hold on. Okay. Children born to you after them will be yours and recorded under the names of their brothers with regard to their inheritance. When I was returning from Padan to my sorrow, Rachel died along the way, and some distance from Ephrath in the land of Canaan. I buried her there along the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. Oh, somebody's here. And basically, he's just kind of reminiscing, right? And when Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" And Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons God has given me here." So these are the sons that he knew were with him, but he's now referring to them. And he's like, wait, these are them? Because it says here that now his eyesight was very poor, because he says, "Bring them to me and I will bless them." So Joseph brought them to him.
It's muted already. Close the door.
Sorry. So we are reading Genesis. Catherine, just so you know, Genesis chapter 48 and 49 today. I wanted to do all three, but I didn't want to rush through it. So this is where we're at. We're in 48 right now. So Joseph brought them to him and he kissed them and embraced them. It's clear that they're little kids in this. So that's interesting to me too, because they're little kids. He can barely see, but here he comes. And remember, all of the things that they do are very significant. So right here, it says, Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again, but now God has even let me see your offspring." Then Joseph took them from his father's knees and bowed his face to the ground. So they were literally, have you ever seen like a kid standing next to their parent and they're like kind of holding onto their leg? Nervous, like my son does that to me all the time. Well, that's what I imagine, like that's where they were at, and he was like, come, you know, scooting them up, and they're like, and so they're tiny still. And it says, then Joseph took them both with his right hand, Ephraim toward Israel's left, and with his left hand Manasseh towards Israel's right, and brought them to Israel. But Israel stretched out his right hand and put it on the head of Ephraim. Casey's here. Okay. Put it on the head of Ephraim, but Israel stretched out right here. Okay. The younger, and crossing his hands. So he's essentially like this, right? So Casey, we're reading chapters 48 and 49 in Genesis. We're in 48 right now. But essentially Jacob is like this, putting his hand on each child. Now, as it says here, Manasseh was the oldest. And we know how this is supposed to work in that culture, especially if Joseph has been in Egypt for long enough. The oldest boy is supposed to get all the blessing, right? He's supposed to get the bigger blessing at the very least. That's just how things were. So between Manasseh and Ephraim, Manasseh was the older one. So the right hand is always supposed to be like the right hand. Like when they refer to Jesus, he's on the right hand of God. There's a reason for that. It's just a symbolism. And so the right hand in Joseph's eyes should have been on Manasseh's head. And that is how he literally brought him up to him. But Jacob crossed hands. So the right hand speaks favor and strength and skill. That is what's supposed to have represented then. And as I said, Jesus sits on the right hand of God. So it's all very kind of just a way they did things to represent and symbolize the importance of the person and their status. But Jacob, here we go here, he had other plans. So then he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, may he bless these boys." I have somebody, I don't remember this name. Okay. Hello, welcome. We are reading chapters 48 and 49 in Genesis. We're in 48 right now. We just started not too long ago. So he says, and they may, okay, may he bless these boys, and they be called by my name, and the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and they may grow to be numerous within the land, which they do. When Joseph saw this, that his father placed his right hand on Ephraim's head, he thought it was a mistake and took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's. And Joseph said to his father, "Not that, my father, this one is the firstborn." So he's like, maybe it's just, he's old. He can't see. He barely knows these kids. Maybe he's just confused. "Put your right hand on his head." But the father refused and said, "I know, my son. I know. He too will become a tribe, and he too will be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his offspring will become a populous nation." So he blessed them that day, putting Ephraim before Manasseh, when he said, "The nation Israel will the nation Israel will invoke blessings by you, saying, 'May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh.'" Israel said to Joseph, "Look, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Over and above what I am giving your brothers, I am giving you the one mountain slope that I took from the Amorites with my sword and bow." So it's obvious he's going to be blessing Joseph more. It's kind of what he's indicating. I also think it's funny. I put here that I thought it was a little bit ironic that, considering what happened with Jacob and his brother Esau, remember they're twins, but Jacob was technically the second one. Esau got the blessing. Esau sold the blessing. But the point is, it's just ironic that Jacob is now saying, like, no, it's the younger one. It's funny. But that's what he does. And I don't believe anything is by coincidence. I believe it's Holy Spirit led, whether he realizes or not. But I do think it's kind of funny because he was the younger one, so just kind of a little funny thing there. Okay. So as he's saying it, he is getting ready to pass. So remember, he thought he might pass, and then he spent 17 years with Joseph, which was amazing. But now he is ready to pass. So he's 147 years old at this point, and I put Jacob predicting again all of the things that are going to be happening, right? So that's what's interesting about all of these last words, is that they all come true. It's all, somebody else is here, is that it's all a prophecy. Hello, Kimberly. We are in chapters 48 and 49 of Genesis. We just got done with 48, so we're moving on to 49. Okay. So we're going to start. Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather around me, and I will tell you what will happen to you in the days to come." Can you imagine that? Can you imagine hearing that? "Gather around, let me tell you about your future." It's like, okay. And they're not going to like it. Some of them are not going to like it. "So come together and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength and my first fruits of my virility, excelling in prominence, excelling in power. Turbulent as water, you will not excel, because you got in your father's bed and you defiled it. He got into my bed." So up until this point, Reuben thought no one knew about this. So in the time, it was, I want to say, I think it's chapter 35. And it's very brief about what Reuben did. It's like a one-liner. So if I remember correctly. Okay, it's chapter 34, actually, I think. No, I was right. 35. Must be. Find it here somewhere. Guys, I promise I have my crap together. Anyway, it says here, somewhere in here, I wrote it down. I just need to look at my notes. But it says that he slept with, it's 35:22. I did write it down. So he slept with his father's concubine, which is basically like a secondary wife, somebody that he can have kids with, but not necessarily in love with, not necessarily in the house with him, kind of a thing. But definitely not somebody that your son should be sleeping with. So what it says here of this timeline is that Rachel died, and on the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem, he went to bury her. And Jacob set out a marker there for her. Somebody else is here. And And in that time, it says Israel set out again and pitched his tent before the Tower of Eder. While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah, and Israel heard about it. So it says Israel heard about it. However, he never said anything about it. Well, now he's saying something about it, and Reuben is probably like, what? Wait. This is not how I thought this was going to go, because Reuben is the oldest. So he's waiting for his plentiful blessing. And what he's saying to him is, Reuben, not only did you do that, but it's clear that there's many quotes about it. And I'm not a man, so I cannot talk about it from a man's perspective. But I know that lust and sexual sin can be a very big driving force for people. And it definitely was with Reuben. And he's basically saying to him that, like, you can't be trusted with a lot because you kind of act on impulse, you know? So that's where the water reference comes from. And I agree to an extent that there are definite people in my life that I have seen that are very, very driven by those types of things. And it is a sin just like any other sin. But he was letting him know, not only did I know about it, I don't appreciate it, and it's costing you. Not sure how I got disconnected. No worry, Kelsey. Thank you for being here. So here we go. So now it's Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their knives are vicious weapons. May I never enter their council. May I never join their assembly. For in their anger they kill men, and on a whim they hamstring oxen. Their anger is cursed, for it is strong, and their fury, for it is cruel. I will disperse them throughout Jacob and scatter them. I always think it's funny that they flip-flop between Jacob and Israel, but that's what he means when he says that. And scatter them throughout Israel. So remember that Simeon and Levi, that's who I'm talking about. Yes, Simeon and Levi. So they had a bit of a problem. They found out that their sister Dinah had been raped. And they didn't just kill the man that did it, named Shechem. They had a massacre. They killed a bunch of people. Obviously, that's not okay. But the problem here, I think, from what I have gathered, is it wasn't just that. It was that the problem was that they already had this anger inside of them, this burning anger inside of them, and they just wanted to release it. And when that happened, it gave them a very good excuse to release it. And people like that are not going to be able to be level-headed either. Have you ever been around somebody that is angry to the point to where they are just waiting for someone to mess up or waiting for somebody to? Something told me to be here. I'm glad, Kelsey. I'm glad you're here. But yeah, there's always going to be people in your life that you come across like that. They're just wanting to be angry. Like they'll just find something to pick at or find a situation that isn't going completely their way, and they will act on it. And that is what they did here. Were they justified in being upset? Absolutely. But they did what above and beyond upset. So he is letting them know that that's not okay here. Judah, your brother will praise you. Your hand will be on the necks of your enemies, and your father's sons will bow down to you. Judah is a young lion. My son, you return from the kill. He crouches, he lies down like a lion or a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, or the staff between his feet, until he whose right it is comes, and the obedience of the people belongs to him. He ties his donkey to a vine, and the colt of his donkey to the choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. So, for most of us, we know that Jesus comes from the line of Judah. He's referred to as the Lion of Judah sometimes, and Judah might not have had the best character himself. He got in a bit of a mess himself. If you want to read back on that, it was not his finest hour, but he had this very redeeming point that just happened a few chapters ago, or a couple chapters ago, and it was that he interceded on behalf of Benjamin, the youngest, the one that meant so much to Jacob, because Jacob and his brothers all thought they would never see Joseph again for different reasons. Jacob thought he was dead. The other brothers knew they sold him into slavery, and they never thought they'd see him again, and they didn't know that they were in the presence of him at this time. And Judah basically said, instead of him, take me. And when he did that, it was very, very redeeming to be able to decide that he was going to put himself at risk and for his dad and for his family. And it was a redeeming quality. So I don't know exactly how it works and why the line of Judah, but I do know that God uses the unlikely, and that is exactly what this is. I also think here the scepter will not depart from Judah, or the staff from between his feet, until he whose right it is comes. So that's Jesus. Jesus is from the tribe of Judah, and that is why the scepter will not depart from Judah, because Jesus is king. Also, people like King David, I believe King Solomon, I believe Paul from New Testament Paul, I believe they're all from the tribe of Judah. No, wait, Paul's from Benjamin. But King David and Solomon are both from Judah. King David comes 600 years after this, and Jesus comes 1600 years after this. So imagine this prophecy. That's how far ahead this prophecy is going. And all of this to say, Jacob is predicting the mass exodus. So if you read Exodus, it's 400 years from now, from where we're reading now. And it's when Moses leads his group of people out of Egypt to the promised land. And like I said, they start off with these 70 people and ends up being 2 million people. So when he says he'll make a great nation out of Jacob, he certainly does. So all of this is pretty incredible. And when I was talking about Reuben earlier, that was all like 40 years ago. Like, so many of these things that Jacob is talking about were many, many years ago, but he has to enforce them. It's part of these blessings. So now we get to Zebulun. Will live by the seashore and will be a harbor for ships, and his territory will be the next to Sidon. And then we have Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the saddlebags. He saw that his resting place was good and that the land was pleasant. So he leaned his shoulder to bear a load and became a forced laborer. And Dan will judge his people, and he is, I believe if you read in Judges, they are the judges. As one of the tribes of Israel, Dan will be a snake by the road, a viper beside the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backward. There's a lot to Dan. Got to read more on that. But I love here, after he says that, during this proclamation, he's saying all this stuff. It says, I wait for your salvation, Lord. So he is fading. He is passing. And as he's passing, he's talking about his salvation. He's talking to God. Gad will be attacked by raiders, but he will attack their heels. Asher's food will be rich, and he will produce royal delicacies. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful vine beside a spring. Its branches climb over the wall. The archers attacked him, shot at him, and were hostile towards him, because that is true. He had a lot of hostility in his life when it came to his family. Yet his bow remained steady. His strong arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, by the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, and blessings of the breast and the womb. The blessings of your father excel the blessings of my ancestors, and the bounty of the ancient hills. May they rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince of his brothers. So that is quite the blessing. And it's also a very true. Jacob knows that Joseph was blessed by more than just he had a constant fellowship with God through everything he had been through. Joseph was born, he was the favorite, he was picked on, he wasn't loved by his brothers, life was made a little hard then. He then gets sold into slavery, he's in jail, he gets accused of things he didn't do. You know, there's a lot that happened with Joseph, but during that time, he is always in fellowship with God. the entire time. And God blessed him greatly, not with just being able to get, keep going and excelling, but with the wisdom he had. He got them through an entire famine. I mean, look at last week's reading where we talked about all the things and the moving parts he did with money and the way it was meant to be done. And he did it all. And with God's help, he's been blessed with all of this wisdom. And it's just a truly crazy thing to witness when you're reading about it, because he could have just thrown in the towel. He could have just been done, and he wasn't. He wanted to be in fellowship with God, even through the hardest and toughest of times. And then it says Benjamin, which is the final boy here. Benjamin is a wolf. He tears his prey. In the morning, he devours his prey. And in the evening, he divides the plunder, which the tribe of Benjamin is known for being fierce. You have to do some research on it because it's not going to say anything. Obviously, we're almost done with Genesis, but in Judges, I think Judges 19 and 20, you can hear all about that, about the tribe of Benjamin and what he's talking about here. But what's so cool is all these are prophecies. Not only does he talk about their past, but he talks about their future. So he's talking about what is to come, and he really meant it. Jacob here, it says, these are the tribes of Israel, 12 in all, and this is what their father said to them. He blessed them, and he blessed each one with a suitable blessing. So for them, it was a suitable blessing. And then he commanded them, I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my ancestors in the cave in the field of Ephron and Hethite. The cave is in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, in the land of Canaan. This is the field Abraham purchased from Ephron and the Hethite as burial property. Abraham and his wife Sarah are buried there. Isaac and his wife Rebekah are buried there. And I buried Leah there. The field and the grave in it were purchased from the Hethites. And when Jacob had finished giving charges to his sons, he drew his feet into the bed, took his last breath, and was gathered to his people. So he got to say everything he needed to say, give the blessings. He said he's 147 years old. He thought he was going to pass 17 years earlier. Instead, he got to spend 17 years with Joseph, which I just think is amazing, that he didn't only see Joseph when he never thought he would again, but he got to see his offspring, and then he blesses his offspring. So there's something really beautiful about that. Jacob was the final patriarch. So it was Abraham, and then Isaac, and then Jacob. And it's just, I don't know, it's the end of an era kind of a thing, but the beginning of something else, and the beginning of a lot of things to come. Abraham, Isaac, they are mentioned in here because, like I said, it is the patriarch. It was a big deal. But Jacob was named Israel for a reason. This is the beginning of Israel. And that's such a big thing because all you read about from now on is about the Israelites, it's about Israel, about God's people. I mean, later you read more about the Gentiles, everything. But what I mean is that is who God was leading through all of this Old Testament. And it's also something to be said about the fact that, oh, by the way, Danica, who's in here right now, she made me this. She makes these. They're pretty awesome. It's like it's a bookmark for my Bible, but it's also pretty. I could use these to help me mark pages too. But anyway, so a little plug there, but I love it. So it's interesting because in Egypt, you could have been buried in like this amazing tomb. I mean, Joseph is the prime minister, basically, for lack of a better term there. He is really important. His dad could have had the coolest burial, but he didn't want that. He wanted what he was meant to have, which was he wanted to be with the people he loved and respected. And I just think that's so amazing that even after life, like that is what he wanted. Now it might be a pain for his sons, but that's what he wants. And it's something to be praised because it's all God ordained. Now, next week, we're going to read chapter 50. It is the end of Genesis. I was going to possibly I'm going to pray about it quite a bit and see what God has to tell me, but I am curious on what people want to read next because we could keep going, but these chapters in the Old Testament, I've been reading them And some of them are harder to get through if you read them all straightforward. So we will figure out what we're going to do next. I think the Bible as a whole is God's love letter to us. So there's no going wrong. But I do want to know what God wants for this group next. I appreciate everyone for being here. Honestly, it's been since October. I just wanted to say a couple of things that God has on my heart, which is Kelsey, that is in here, just lost her grandma and she is struggling a bit. And I just think it's really important to for everybody to just pray for her and for her to know that she is loved and that God is here for her and that we're all here for her. But most of all, that when we lose people in our life, it is a testament to the fact that we have loved and been loved. And it is so incredibly hard when you're grieving, but there is something beautiful about I love you, Kelsey. There is something beautiful about the fact that we get to miss people because of how much we got to love them. And I just want to leave that there. I know it's hard, and I cannot tell you how sorry I am that you're going through it, but I do know that you, Kelsey, love with your whole heart. And I just pray that God will be close to you during all of this. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing, this group of women that keep coming together, new that have been here for a while, because there's no point in the Bible that I'm reading that you will not come in at a part that makes sense to someone in here. This is a lot of facts, but at the end of the day, what does Joseph represent to us? He represents the fact that when you continue to have fellowship with God, even through the worst of times, something great will come of it. In the end of this incredibly dysfunctional family, I'm sorry, girl, I know that I'm new to this group first night, but prayers to you. Oh, see, Kelsey, you got prayers coming at you from Faith. And what a beautiful name that is. And thank you for being here, Faith. And we will have, like I said, next week we finish Genesis, but I'm going to keep going. I don't see any stopping in my near future. I want to keep going with Bible study. I think it's important. But Joseph shows us that through all the dysfunction, something beautiful at the end happened, which was not only did he get to be with his dad again and his brothers again, the forgiveness that he was able to give them, but he got them through a famine, he got them through death. They could have all died. All their